Welcome back to the Motivated Mind Zone. Glad to have you here. Today, we are taking a really deep analytical dive into the highest level of communication. We're talking about decoding what is not said. Specifically, we're zeroing in on the power of the unfinished sentence.
Yeah, and we're moving, way beyond simple language comprehension here. We're going to be dissecting those moments when a speaker just trails off or leaves a thought hanging in the air, maybe uses a deliberate linguistic loose end. And look, it might sound like sloppy talk, but in advanced conversation, it's anything but.
I think we've all been there. That moment when a colleague says, if only we could just get past the roadblock on, and then they just stop. And we
Yeah.
usually fill in that gap, but like subconsciously, our mission today is to make that whole process fully conscious, analytical.
Exactly. We really need to reframe these fragments. They're not communication failures. They're actually, well, they're advanced invitations. They invite you, the listener, to engage with what the speaker really means on a much deeper, more intimate level.
And for you, this isn't just about learning new words. This is about gaining a critical analytical edge. This is the skill that separates a good listener from a truly perceptive one. Whether you're navigating a politically charged meeting or just trying to deepen a personal connection, it's the ultimate cognitive advantage in figuring out real intent.
That's the goal.
Right.
We're giving you the blueprint. We'll cover the psychology behind why we trail off. We'll provide a practical toolkit for interpreting context and silent cues. And finally, we'll deliver some concrete steps on how you can master this essential skill.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why does the human brain constantly choose to leave thoughts incomplete?
Right. So we have to start with the mechanics. Linguistically, the term for incomplete thought is anaculothon. It's a formal name for a very common phenomenon. Now, we're not just using this term to sound academic. It helps us categorize the difference between a simple pause for breath and a genuine structural break in the thought.
And what's driving that structural break? I mean, I would assume for clear communication, the goal is always to use more explicit language, not less.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But the overwhelming driver here is cognitive efficiency. Our brains are incredibly resource hungry, and they're constantly calculating shortcuts. If I, as the speaker, calculate that you already have, say, 80% of the information you need, my brain just conserves energy by skipping that last 20%.
So it's a high-speed collaborative assumption. We're sharing the burden of finishing the thought.
Precisely. And this relies heavily on what researchers like Herbert Clark called the theory of common ground. The whole assumption is that you and I share enough mutual knowledge, shared history, and context that I don't need to spell out the obvious.
That makes perfect sense in close relationships. If my spouse and I have been arguing about mortgage rates, I can just say, I wish the bank would simply, and they know exactly what I mean. But what happens when that assumed common ground isn't actually shared, or if it's diverged? Isn't that hugely risky in, say, a professional environment?
It is the number one failure point of this entire system. In stressful or diverse situations, that common ground is highly unstable. The speaker assumes they're communicating efficiently, but what the listener receives is just ambiguous noise because their contexts don't align. The risk is high. And that's why decoding is so essential for the listener.
So the risk of getting it wrong is built right into the efficiency mechanism itself. That changes things. Now, when we trail off, it isn't always just about efficiency. It can be a very powerful tool for, emotional signaling or even tactical leverage.
Absolutely. Think about vulnerability. If someone starts a difficult admission, like, I feel like maybe we should discuss the fact that and then stops. That silence is loaded. The full thought, maybe it's an apology or an admission of failure, is just too hard to say out loud. The speaker is kind of hoping you'll understand how hard it is,
Yeah.
maybe inviting some empathy.
But then you have the complete inverse of that. The tactical power move in a high-stakes scenario, like a negotiation.
Right. Imagine a corporate lawyer. They lean forward and say, if we move forward with the conditions in Article 4, The long-term impact on your overseas distribution network will be,
Hmm.
and then they just look at you. They let that thread hang in the air.
They haven't actually threatened anything, but the pause just screams danger.
It's brilliant, actually. They've forced the opponent to voice their own worst financial loss, regulatory problems, whatever it is. And in doing so, they reveal their own anxieties, all without the lawyer ever having to make a specific accusation. It's a very subtle way to exert immense control.
Wow, that is a profound difference. Okay, so if the psychology is the why, let's get practical. Let's move to the how of decoding it. You said context is the foundation.
It is the single most vital element. Without context, a fragment is just noise. With context, it immediately narrows down to one or two really probable options. Context is the filter that does all the heavy lifting for us.
Let's start with layer one then. Conversation history. You have to know the backstory, the trajectory of what you're even talking about.
Take that executive example again. Let's say you're in a company that just had a brutal merger. There's been huge resistance, team burnout. An executive is talking about a new HR tracking policy, and she sighs and says it would only serve two, and stops. Because you know the history, the burnout, the low morale, you instantly decode that ending. Demoralize the new teams even more.
That's so much more than just hearing words. That's reading the entire political landscape of the room. So layer two then has to be the environment and situation.
Crucial. The physical or situational setting fundamentally limits the possible missing words. The exact same verbal fragment can mean entirely different things depending on where you are.
Give us an example that really isolates that environmental shift.
Okay, consider the fragment. Can you find that? Now, if you are standing on the deck of a small boat in a storm, the environment dictates urgency, nautical needs. The missing word is probably life jackets or bilge pump.
High urgency constrained by the danger of the location. Makes sense.
Exactly. But now take that identical fragment and place it in the quiet, climate-controlled silence of a university archive. You're searching through brittle old papers. The request now almost certainly ends with something like the file from 1888 or the signature on the original deed. The constraints of the location change everything.
And we can use that Dr. Evans analogy you mentioned. She's in an ancient tomb staring at a cracked ceiling beam, and she whispers, "We have to watch this, otherwise the ceiling might."
Right. So if context A is immediate danger, say a sensor went off and there was a loud scraping noise, the decode is purely defensive. It's urgent. It's collapse on us.
But if context B, just before that fragment, was a long, anxious discussion about the fragile frescoes on that ceiling and the worry about humidity.
Then the decode is about preservation, not injury. The thought concludes with, be permanently damaged by the humidity. The entire function of the sentence changes based on what just happened. And this is a great mental workout. Pause, predict, and then see if you were right. It refines your skills.
As we deepen this toolkit, we absolutely have to move to the silent majority of communication. Nonverbal cues. If you're only listening to the words, you miss almost everything the fragment is trying to tell you.
We truly do. Nonverbal cues, body language, gestures, facial expressions, they provide the emotional architecture. They provide the context that the missing words were supposed to carry. They are, in a very real way, the immediate completers of the unfinished thought.
Let's focus on body language first. The body often literally finishes the thought, especially when stress is high.
Think about a professional setting. A designer is arguing for a critical feature. They say, I just wish we could increase the visibility of the, but as they speak, they rub their temple and sweep their hand across the entire width of the presentation screen.
The verbal part is vague, but the body language clarifies everything. Temple rub means frustration. The broad sweep defines the area of concern. The decode is the entire layout on the homepage.
Or that classic narrative example. The silent vault keeper whispers to the hero, Sir Kale. The key to the gate lies in the reflection of the bird. While his hand floats, pointing towards some glowing artifact, the gesture is the instruction. It gives you the final word.
And facial expressions, those tiny micro expressions, Paul Ekman's research shows they're like an unfiltered data stream. What do we look for there?
We look for leakage. If a boss says, this new policy rollout is, but their eyes narrow slightly and their mouth pulls into a tight, crooked line, you know the decode is negative no matter how neutral their tone is. The face is saying, this is fundamentally flawed.
And I think the nuance between contempt and disgust is really critical here.
It is. A one-sided lip raise, a little sneer, that's often suppressed contempt. It's critical of the person or the idea. But suppressed disgust, that involves a slight wrinkling of the nose. It signals more of a moral revulsion. Knowing which one you're seeing directs your decode.
Let's add proximity and posture to this. How close we are and how we hold ourselves, it completely frames the tone of the silence.
Proximity is a huge signal of confidentiality. Someone leans in, drops their voice. That tells you the shared secret is either urgent or very sensitive. And posture signals the internal state. Imagine a colleague, Lisa, after a really tough quarterly review. She's standing rigidly, arms crossed, shoulders tight, and she whispers, "The meeting was tough. I think the decision is."
Her entire body is just a study in anxiety. The crossed arms are defensive, guarding the truth. It suggests dread. The decode is clearly bad news or cuts are coming.
And this brings us to the famous override rule. What happens when the words conflict with the nonverbal cues? Say someone sounds calm, but their body language is screaming stress.
In almost every single case, the nonverbal cue overrides the verbal one. The body just doesn't lie as well as the voice does. The fragment gets completed by the speaker's true feeling, not the socially acceptable thing they're trying to say. It's the ultimate tell.
It's amazing how those involuntary signals betray us, isn't it? You might try to sound calm, but a rising pitch under stress just gives the game away. And that rising pitch is the focus of our next dimension, auditory cues.
Yes, the acoustic properties, pitch, pace, and volume, they build the emotional architecture of the fragment. Intonation is a fantastic indicator of what the speaker wants from the listener.
If the speaker's voice goes up at the end of the fragment, like a question, it's an open invitation. They want you to jump in and complete the thought with them. They're asking for your help or your input.
But if the intonation falls even slightly, that signals finality. Closure. It's like, we tried everything and that's just how it is. The voice dropping off completes the thought with pure resignation.
And pitch and pace are massive tells for someone's internal state. A high-pitched, strained voice when someone asks, "Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed with this investment in?" That high pitch is a huge red flag. It indicates acute anxiety and very serious doubt.
Conversely, slowing the pace and dropping the volume, the secret of the whole operation was, that's a classic suspense builder. It signals importance or confidentiality.
We see this all the time in high-tension scenarios. Think of a police interview. The detective says, "We know you were there." And the security video clearly shows you hiding the erranter. But he puts this sharp, sudden volume spike on the word hiding.
That auditory emphasis directs your entire focus. The volume spike points directly to the critical missing word, the weapon. The tone provides the evidence the words were trying to hide.
This complexity means we have to incorporate the most crucial and often overlooked layer of filtering, cultural and personal variations. Assuming a pause means the same thing to everyone, everywhere. That's the fastest way to make a decoding error.
This is where understanding high context versus low context cultures becomes absolutely essential for any advanced learner.
In high context cultures, many parts of East Asia, for example, communication relies so heavily on shared history and implicit understanding. In those cultures, the social cost of a direct confrontation or a blunt no was just too high.
So in that setting, trailing off is actually a very strong statement.
It is a firm, undeniable statement, just delivered softly. A subtle trailing off, something like, "Your proposed timeline is aggressive, and it might be better if we, That isn't hesitation, Because direct confrontation is avoided, the cultural context dictates that this is a strong, definitive no, this is impossible.
And contrast that with a low context culture like the US or Germany, where communication is generally more direct and explicit.
Right. Their trailing off is far more likely to signal emotional discomfort or excitement or just plain forgetfulness. The default meaning shifts entirely. And you also have to account for personality. An extrovert might trail off because their thoughts are racing ahead. An introvert might trail off out of caution.
Let's put this all together. You present a radical idea to a key business partner from a high context culture. He pauses for a full 2 seconds, then smiles faintly and says, "That plan is certainly ambitious."
The pause is the key. In that culture, the pause is a sign of respect, of consideration. It's often what comes before delivering bad news politely. The high context background tells you direct criticism is rude. Therefore, ambitious is the most polite, socially acceptable warning that the plan is far too risky and likely to fail.
The novice hears praise and feels great. The expert hears the explicit warning. That distinction is everything. Okay, we've built the framework. Let's focus on professional applications in high-stakes scenarios.
This skill just transforms your effectiveness. Consider that tense budget review meeting. The head of finance is reviewing a new project. She speaks slowly, deliberately, and says, "The Q3 projection shows we have the capital for." And then she subtly, almost imperceptibly, glances at the marketing director across the table.
So you have to layer the tone, her known personality, and that nonverbal cue, the glance.
And that glance is signaling a political reality. The complete thought is, we have capital for existing projects, but we absolutely do not have it for your unfunded marketing thing.
Yeah.
The person who catches that glance knows the time to defend their request is right now, not later.
This is also so crucial in a job interview. The interviewer says, "We need people who can handle rapid change, and I see on your resume you worked at." And they tap their finger right next to a listing for a failed startup.
They are giving you an invitation, but it's a test. They're directing you to address the perceived negative, the failure, and proactively spin it into a positive story of resilience and learning. The gap in the sentence is the challenge. You have to complete it with your success story.
To truly master this, we need systematic practice. And the best method, I think, is using stories. It's the essential cognitive simulator.
Narratives engage the brain's mirror neurons. They let you run social simulations without real-world consequences. It's high-fidelity training.
Let's go back to the Circale analogy. The silent vault keeper whispers, "The key to the gate lies in the reflection of the words." And then, as a final gesture, he brushes imaginary dust off Kale's armor, which is famously made of lunar steel that absorbs all light.
You have to weave the known context, that light-absorbing steel, with the immediate gesture. The brushing action is a distraction, but it's focusing on the absence of light. The decode is the moon. The key lies in the moon's reflection. That synthesis is the ultimate goal.
Okay, now for you, the listener, let's break down 3 actionable steps for building this skill. We need to treat this like daily training.
First, the passive listening drill. This is zero-risk training. When you're listening to any audio news report, an audiobook, the second a speaker trails off, hit pause. Mentally predict the ending based on tone and context, then press play and check your prediction. This calibrates your subconscious inference engine.
Second, systematic journaling and bias correction. Keep a log of fragments you hear during the day. Note the context, your first guess at the meaning, and what it actually turned out to be. You need that feedback loop to identify your own biases. Do you always assume the worst? Do you miss social cues? Journaling helps you get more accurate.
And third, interactive games for nonverbal fluency. Play Finish My Thought with a partner. Start an ambiguous sentence. I really think the team's biggest challenge is. And then use only gestures, facial expressions, and intonation to get your partner to say the word, whether it's budget or leadership. This trains you to link the emotional weight to the physical cue and to do it fast.
Decoding unfinished sentences is truly an art form that strengthens your personal and professional position. Mastery involves weaving together conversation history, context, silent cues, and tone, all in real time. When you get that right, the unsaid speaks volumes.
And this brings us to our final thought for you to carry forward. The next time a conversation just trails off, don't dismiss it as vagueness. Instead, try to see it for what it often is, a moment of profound implicit trust. The speaker is relying on the fact that you share enough common ground to understand their real intent without them having to say it.
So the question for you is, what deeper insight or moment of essential connection can you find hidden within that brief but powerful silence? Keep conversing, keep listening, and keep decoding.